We've solvent washed our components from the input ring gear to the output shaft, and now we're going to inspect them for wear and damage. Let's start with the output shaft. On the output shaft, we want to pay particular attention to these areas where the shaft rides on a bushing. They should be smooth. They shouldn't have any wear lines in them, any gouges, galling, or discoloration. Also, you want to check the thrust washers. You have one in the back and one inside in the front. These washers, if you squeeze them together tightly and move them, should feel smooth. Should be no binding, no bumpiness, no grittiness. If it feels gritty, wash it again and check it again. Once again, it should feel totally smooth and effortless. If it is, you can reuse it. If it doesn't feel perfect, it should be replaced. The same procedure would be for the thrust washer inside. Next, we look into the reaction carrier. Mainly we want to check these pinion gears. The gears should have no nicks, no galling, no teeth missing. If you apply pressure on them and spin them, they should feel perfectly smooth. Another check is the end play of the pinion gears. They should be between 9 and 24 thousandths end play. They can be easily checked with a feeler gauge inserted between the pinion and the washers. Once again, they should be between 9 and 24 thousandths. If they're less or greater than that, you should discard this entire assembly and get a replacement that's within specification. We also want to look at this internal bushing, which supports the carrier assembly on the output shaft. This bushing should have relatively no wear in it, no scratch marks, no galling, no discoloration. This clearance should be measured using a snap gauge or an inside mic and an outside micrometer. We'll show you how to do that in a few minutes. Next, we move to the low and reverse roller clutch. And when we were cleaning it, what we did was we pushed the internal hub about halfway out. This will expose the rollers and the accompanying springs that operate them. You need to inspect the rollers and accompanying springs. These little flat wafer springs should all be inspected and compared to make sure that there are none missing and none are broken. If any pieces are missing or broken, then the entire assembly has to be disassembled and springs replaced. Also, inspect each roller to make sure that it is perfectly smooth, shows no signs of discoloration from overheating, is not pitted or scored. Looking at the ring that runs within these rollers, it should also be perfectly smooth, have no scoring or discoloration. Pushing the roller back into the hub back inside the sprag assembly, you should be able to rotate it in one direction and it should feel extremely smooth. As long as it operates smoothly in one direction and cannot be operated at all in the opposite direction, it should be reusable. Next is the low and reverse clutch pack. It consists of steels and linings. These are the old ones, and the reason why we left them here is because we want to pay particular attention to the fact that they go from steel to lining, steel to lining, steel to lining, etc. They have to be put back in the same order when you replace them with the new pieces. Also, on all your clutch packs, there will always be one tab that has a reference mark on it. This reference mark is a great value during reassembly. Taking a closer look at one of the old friction plates, you notice that it is starting to break up. It's very dark in color, and what's happened with this plate is that it is run on the hot side. We had internal leakage in this transmission on seals, and basically it allowed the clutch to be not fully engaged, similar to the effect as if you were riding with your foot on your clutch pedal with a manual transmission and you overheated the clutch. This is the same effect. These all have to be replaced. Next is a sun gear and drive shell assembly. What we want to check on this is a condition of all the teeth on both sun gears, and once again, condition of the bushings that support it on the shaft. On this assembly, we also have a nylon thrust washer, which should be inspected for any type of damage. And if you notice, on this particular unit, it's split in half. So this thrust washer must be replaced. Our next piece is an output carrier. And once again, we have a thrust washer, but this is a metal thrust washer. It should also be examined for any type of abnormal wear, discoloration, scoring, galling. Once again, we have pinions to check for wear, smoothness of operation, and once again, end play must be between 9 and 24 thousandths. On this assembly, there is an internal rollerized thrust washer. By pressing down on it and spinning it, you can tell whether it's smooth. If it operates smoothly, it should be reusable. If it does not operate smoothly, you must replace the entire output carrier because that piece is not serviceable. Next, we have the input ring gear, which once again has a nylon thrust washer, which must be inspected, and in our case it needs to be replaced because it ran a little bit too hot and it's cracked. Should also check support bushing and the inner teeth of the carrier gear. As you mentioned before, we'll tell you how to measure the clearance between the bushings and the shafts. We're going to show you how to measure it between the input and output carriers because they're a little bit larger than some of the others and easier to see. The output carrier is housed by the input ring gear. The output carrier is supported by the bushing within the input ring gear. To measure the clearance between the bushing and the carrier, we need a snap gauge or an inside mic and a micrometer of proper dimension. I'm going to use a snap gauge to measure the ID of the bushing. We'll use our micrometer to measure the width of the snap gauge and record that dimension. Next, we'll take our micrometer and measure the outside diameter of the output carrier and record the dimension. By subtracting the dimension of the bushing from the dimension of the carrier sleeve, we'll find out what our clearance is. All clearances should be double checked with the specifications in the manual for the transmission you are working on. If clearances are not adequate, Either bushings and/or components should be replaced as needed to obtain proper dimension.